that in spite of all your busy schedule, you have made it a time to attend to this. And we are very grateful to Reverend Sarvasthananji Maharaj for kindly accepting our request to speak. I am sure everybody will greatly benefit by it. And by the end of the lecture, there will be many takeouts which is going to inspire them to the rest of the day. With these few words, I will request Maharaj to take over. Thank you very much.
Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhum. First and foremost, it's a great pleasure to be talking on such an important topic to people who have gathered, to devotees and admirers of the Ramakrishna movement, who are spread all over the world. And it's a great pleasure that Philippines also has a center now. Most of the continents in the world have at least a few centers. So that shows that the message of Sri Ramakrishna is universal. And that's a very appropriate topic today, where we see so many problems, mainly because of the exclusiveness with which people try to propagate their ideas, ideals. And as a result, there is so much of conflict, either created by man or maybe because of the environment. To add to that, we have the environmental uncertainties because of COVID and other epidemics. But mainly we find that this universalism or the universal message of Sri Ramakrishna is not only necessary for people who are pursuing a spiritual life, but even a day-to-day an ordinary citizen or an ordinary individual trying to survive in this very complicated situation will find his message, the message of Sri Ramakrishna, something like immortal medicine or maybe auxiliary, which will satisfy all their, which will solve all their problems. So when we speak of Sri Ramakrishna's universal message, we cannot forget his personality, because Sri Ramakrishna, whatever he spoke, is based on a universal personality which he had. So you cannot separate the two. His life was his message. So you have to understand his message in the light of his own life. So his remarkably comprehensive, all-inclusive vision or philosophy, or you may say message, will help us to understand what it really means to have a truly universal personality. If you see his whole life, right from his sadhana days or right from his birth, you may say, his thought was always universal. Swami Vivekananda, his chief disciple, said, I did not see Sri Ramakrishna as a person. I saw him as a thought, as an idea which was growing. Every day I saw him. I could not comprehend his wonderful universal personality. It was so difficult to grasp what exactly Sri Ramakrishna stood for. As Christopher Isherwood says, that Sri Ramakrishna was not a human being, he was a phenomena. He introduces Sri Ramakrishna's biography by saying, I am telling you the story of a phenomena. So Swamiji also saw him growing in ideas as somebody who was so universal, so all-inclusive. His thought was universal, his love was universal, his message was universal, and his life work was universal. He stood for mankind in general, though he was born in Bengal, a small town in Bengal, practically unknown all over the world, Kamarpukur. And his setting was that he spent most of his life in Calcutta, as you all know. which was being ruled, which was the headquarters of the British Empire. But strangely enough, that same British Empire helped spread this universal message of Sri Ramakrishna, though he lived practically unknown in a corner of a small town or small village, and then he spent the latter half of his life in Calcutta. But still his message became universal even when he was alive, or at least a few years after his Mahasamadhi. It was Swami Vivekananda who took up his message, understood it, and then preached it all over the world. And the world was ready for that. So we see Sri Ramakrishna's universal message, or Sri Ramakrishna himself stands up for mankind in general. Though geographically we can say he was born in Bengal or Kamarpukur, but Kamarpukur or Bengal or even India does not limit his personality or his message. He stands up for mankind in general, and that is indicated by the large number of centers we have in almost all the continents. People speaking different languages, belonging to different nationalities, creed, culture, gender, even gender. The differences of gender and the differences of caste, creed, religion, ethnicity, they don't have any significance, and anybody at any stage of his life can benefit from his universal message. So in his broad and inclusive vision, he has included, you can find that all are included, all types of grades of human beings, from the lowest and the most ignorant and the highest and the most enlightened of people. So you will find that Sri Ramakrishna, as Swami Vivekananda once remarked, had a unique capacity, and that makes him universally relevant, and his message has a universal tone to it, because he took man from wherever he was, no matter from which background he came, from which race, which nationality, which creed, which culture, which gender. Now there is so much of diversity because of this exclusiveness, because of these factors. But Sri Ramakrishna came to break everything. He removed all barriers, and everybody, from the lowest human being, most ignorant human being, to the most enlightened spiritual being, everybody has some message. He takes everybody forward. He doesn't restrict his message to a particular class or a particular country or a particular ethnicity. He transcends all boundaries. So, moreover, we'll see in his life that he takes into account the various aspects of human life and dwells on the basic problems of human existence. We have a lot of problems, no doubt. Some of them we classify as secular problems, political problems, social problems, economic problems, and then there are, of course, intrinsic spiritual problems, which are the root cause of all our problems. That is what he pointed out, that he sees that to all these problems, there cannot be a gross solution. As it is famously said, for all our worldly problems, no matter how much we try, whichever ism we try, we have tried communism, we have tried socialism, we have tried capitalism, we have tried so many isms, so many people have come and tried to bring about reform and try to change, solve the problems of mankind. Even we have such great organizations like UNESCO after the World War II, which try to bring out some kind of, try to become universal, encourage citizens all over the world to become universal. No doubt they are trying their best, but all of them do not succeed. Because unlike Sri Ramakrishna, who went to the very root of problem of unification or universalism, which is spirituality. So if we try to attain some kind of universalism at a gross level, it's not going to succeed. You may start reform movements, you may start political movements, and everybody believes that his system, his politics, or his socio-economic theory is the best. So many isms. We have Marxism, we have capitalism, and there are so many names. Everybody is trying in his or her own way to propagate his ideology, and then they become exclusive themselves. They somehow lose their universal attitude and they become very narrow, dogmatic, and they say, as long as you believe in our ideology, you will not, there will not be peace. And that is, they start with noble ideas. They want unity, they want peace, they want a universal attitude. But finally, because they are too gross in their approach, they start creating their own sect. That is what Sri Ramakrishna did not do. Swami Vivekananda very clearly said that Sri Ramakrishna's life, his whole personality was a universal spirit which was all inclusive, all loving, and rarely to be found elsewhere. He had no peers, as Swamiji said. So once Swami Vivekananda said that he was, Sri Ramakrishna, when he was referring to his master, he said, he was as broad as the sky, but at the same time was as deep as the ocean. What does it mean? It is so difficult to be, very often we find in history that wherever there is intensity of thought, wherever you are deep, you go deep into one particular theme or subject. Say, for example, you believe in a particular ideology and you hold that ideology to be everything, and then you give your life to it. Then you can say you are very deeply involved in that ideology. You may be as deep as the ocean, but that makes you exclusive, that makes you narrow, that makes you bigoted. You don't have that all broadness or the universal approach. You have to sacrifice. In the end, you become a fanatic. You become totally exclusive. So wherever there is intensity of thought, there is depth of thought. And you become very powerful, no doubt. Within a short time, you will find so many movements in the world where a lot of people have spread their movement very fast because of their fanaticism. It may succeed. That exclusiveness, that intensity of thought is so powerful that it will succeed. But on the other hand, if there is breadth of vision, if you are too liberal or if you are universal, then the message, people think, gets diluted. They think that the intensity of thought, the capacity to preach and propagate and aggressively spread ideas suffers. You can't be liberal at the same time, exclusive, deep in thought at the same time. So you will find people sacrificing this universality, and their teaching becomes less effective because if intensity of thought is there, the breadth of vision suffers. It is very, very rare to have this breadth of vision, this all-inclusive, wonderful heart, at the same time intensely deep, the intensity or depth of thought at the same time in one personality is very rare. And that remark Swami Vivekananda makes about his master. He says he was as deep as the ocean. It's a very significant thing. He had no compromise. He did not compromise with anything. He said, and he repeated it many times, whether you take every incident of his life or you read his gospel or his message, you will find that he said God realization or realizing that you are divine or you are a spirit is the goal of life. Like all the prophets and all the great universal people before him, universal personalities before him, he made absolutely no compromise. He was very intense in this thought. If you read his gospel, his message, you will find he does not discuss anything. No sociology, no politics, no economics. If you open any newspaper or any magazine, you will find everybody is giving one solution for all the problems. And as many problems are there, there are so many solutions. And people at the end realize that there is no agreement. And people quarrel. They say, my solution is the best or your solution is not good. So it ends up, this kind of attitude doesn't really help. But in Sri Ramakrishna's life, he went to the core problem. His intensity was so much. He said to realize God and God alone is the goal of life, not only for individual life but for collective life of the nation. And Swamiji elaborated on that. He says India will die if she does not persist in her search for God. That was the universal message that Sri Ramakrishna gave, and Swami Vivekananda spelled it out because he knew for time immemorial our sages, our rishis, and all the great people, of course, all over the world. It's not that just, but India happens to be a country where such people were born more and more who believed that God realization or realization that one is a spirit or one is divine became the prominent goal of life for most of the saints, rishis, and the incarnations which appeared. But they came in other cultures as well. Only thing perhaps it was not understood, and people were too gross to understand the spiritual depth of these great people like Jesus Christ, like Buddha, and like all the great prophets all over the world. They spoke like Sri Ramakrishna of the spirit and spirit alone. They never said God and mammon can live at the same time. So it is futile. Before we understand what Sri Ramakrishna's universal message is, you have to understand that it is futile to solve our worldly problems. They may be small problems or big problems like the pandemic and so many other problems with natural causes. But most of the problems are created by human beings themselves. So, whatever be the problem, the gross problems or the worldly problems cannot be solved by worldly means. This is the first universal message of Sri Ramakrishna. That is why you will find that he never spoke about social or economic or political problems. He did not care for that. People think if he spoke of God and God alone, then how can he solve all these problems? Because he knew this is the only way to solve the worldly problems with the spiritual solution, not with a worldly solution, which will never happen. So if you see, as Swami Vivekananda pointed out, there is no conflict between faith and reason. People who came to Sri Ramakrishna, if you see his own life, people of different kinds, even an atheist, his Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar, he was an atheist. He did not believe. In fact, he did not like that devotees did pranams, and he did not believe in anything theistic. He did not even believe in a God. He thought science was enough to explain everything, and science had a universal approach and it can solve all the problems. But even such a person was so close to Sri Ramakrishna. He did not find any conflict between his theories and Sri Ram. That means even a scientist, an atheist. So all the conflicts between faith and reason, which was one of the main reasons where there was a revolution in Europe, where the intellectual class, the scientific community, believed that there is no need for a dogmatic approach to religion. They did not understand true spirituality, as Sri Ramakrishna explained later on, but they thought there is no need when most of the problems can be solved by the power of science, by a scientific approach. I am not saying just science and technology. It is the scientific approach which just focuses on truth and truth alone. But that is in the external universe. We have to focus on truths, whether they are in the external universe or the internal universe. You have to extend it to all the phases of life. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna did. So there was no inherent conflict between faith and reason, between science and religion, between poetry and philosophy, between action and meditation, between social and monastic ideals in Sri Ramakrishna's life. You will find this. Though he spoke only of God and God alone, but that is because he wanted a God-centered life to permeate and pervade all our actions. Whether you are a monastic or a householder, whether you are intensely busy as Sri Krishna had done before him, even in the midst of the battlefield, he preached the philosophy of the spirit, the philosophy of divinity, the philosophy of godliness. So there is no conflict in Sri Ramakrishna's life between action and meditation, whether you are leading a meditative life or an intensely active life. There is no conflict. there is no conflict between science and religion. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna's very approach to religion was scientific, because he never expected any of his disciples, including Swami Vivekananda, to accept anything as a dogma without any reason. His plan was to lead each and every individual, whether he believes in reason, in whatever sphere of life he was, to the highest goal, the realization of the innate perfection in man, along his own line of development. So Mahendralal Sarkar, an atheist, came. He believed in science. Sri Ramakrishna said, okay, fine. You just proceed on your path. Ultimately, if you are sincere, if you are truthful, then you will reach the same goal as a person who is meditating. But you have to be sincere. You have to hold on to truth. So his philosophy was very nicely explained by Swami Vivekananda, who said, Sri Ramakrishna was a great teacher, a universal teacher. He could take man from where he was, where he stood, and from there he could give a lift. He had something for everybody. That makes a personality or a message truly universal. It's not just universalism which is spoken of in many forums like UNESCO, where we speak of unity. We speak of unity, but they don't accept, there is that diversity which is there. How to combine this diversity with unity? You can't expect unity in the gross world. Everybody is unique and different. The more gross you become, the more there will be diversity. And our philosophy, especially Sri Ramakrishna and the Vedanta philosophy which he preached, and Swami Vivekananda preached all over the world, very clearly says there is no way you can get rid of diversity. As long as human beings will be gross, there will be diversity. There will be diverse nations, there will be diverse ethnicities, there will be diverse because of the gunas, as the Gita beautifully says. It is because of the preponderance of certain gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, which give rise to so much of variety. The whole of Prakriti, if you find, gives rise to so much of variety. So the solution is not trying to unify. Prakriti will never allow it. You can't say all people should think in the same way, which many of the fanatic movements they try. They say, as long as you believe in our ideology, we will accept you, otherwise we will kill you. This is happening all over the world, and people are so fanatical that they are even prepared to kill in the name of unity. They said only one thing, we want unity, we want to destroy all diversity, and that's never going to succeed if we try it at the gross level. But Sri Ramakrishna's unique message was, his universality was based on the recognition of the divinity of man. So one of the main things that Sri Ramakrishna did was to save religion. What Sri Ramakrishna preached is pure spirituality. It had nothing to do with organized or dogmatic religion. He was the one who infused life into different religions, not only Hindu religion and all the sects that he practiced by his own life, through his own life and sadhana. That was one aspect of it. All the sects within Hinduism he wanted to unite. Unite how? By focusing on the essential, by the spiritual core, which was same in all the sects. But not only that, he went a step ahead and united all the other religions also at the core. And he said that there may be different paths. Outwardly they may be different. But at the core, spirituality should be the core of all effort. All our religious effort or even secular effort. As I said, there was no difference between secular and spiritual. For him, everything was spiritual. Because spirit, the only way you can unify, the only way you can breathe a universal spirit in this world is by unifying, is by going deeper and deeper and touching the divine. So you may say, he, by his wonderful doctrine or wonderful message of Shiva Jnane Jeev Seva, that means trying to see the God in man, trying to see the divinity in man, he converted a theocentric religion, which believed, theocentric means God-based religion, a God who is outside, maybe above the clouds, or there were so many concepts of God, which was already confusing people, not only in India, but all over the world. So India became a hotbed of different experiments. Everybody is fighting over each other's gods. Some say God is uh, personal, some say is impersonal. Then the new reform movements came. They tried to make a sort of mixture of different ideology. They thought that is the solution. But Sri Ramakrishna went, he was a truly universal being. He said, how can you unite these diverse views? It is never going to happen if we try it externally. Diversity is there in Prakriti and diversity will be there in this world. You can't change. As many people are there, there can be as many gods. That is the core principle of Vedanta which Sri Ramakrishna practiced. As many faiths, so many paths. And he converted that theocentric approach to religion. There's nothing wrong in a theocentric approach to religion. Theocentric means God-centric. But he made it human-centric. He said, why not worship, since everything is pervaded by God, since the divine spirit is pervading everywhere, why restrict your worship only to temples, churches and mosques? Try to bring that God in our day-to-day life in ordinary human beings, in beings in general, not just human beings. But human beings is the Taj Mahal of all temples, as Swamiji said. If we realize this spirit, it's easier to realize the spirit in a human body than all other creatures. But at the same time, our all-encompassing vision should embrace everybody. Everybody should be included. Even a savage, maybe he is ignorant now, but a day will come when. So Sri Ramakrishna never lost hope in humanity. So it was such a positive, refreshingly positive approach to life. That makes it truly universal. Now you'll find so many people, if you just open the newspaper or any social media network, if you go today, you'll find so much of negativity. Everybody blaming the other. There's apparently no solution. So Sri Ramakrishna's universal message is more relevant today than it was during his lifetime. The problems were less complex. The problems, both physically and mentally, were much more, less complex than it is today. Today, for the last 30 years, you can say 30 to 50 years, there has been an exponential progress in the so-called science and technology. It's a very good thing, provided we have the right mindset to understand the universal principles underlying this exponential growth in science and technology. We are trying very hard, and we think science and technology and all the amenities that it gives humankind can solve all the problems. You solve one problem, another problem comes. You take care of one virus, another variant comes. So there is a limit to which our worldly solutions or our gross solutions will work. So this approach cannot be universal. It will help us to do some kind of patchwork. You have a problem here, you solve it. You have a problem there, you solve it. But it will be endless, there will be no solution. If you want a root and branch solution, as Swamiji pointed out, as Sri Ramakrishna also pointed out, that you have to go to the root, and you have to remember that it is not based on intellectual appreciation, comprehension, as most of these international forums do. They have very big seminars, they have very big discussions, trying to find out what unity is, how can we have unity, and we have extensive knowledge of so many systems, and very academic approach is used to try to preach. But when it comes to practice, we are big zeros. Even the most universal person, in the sense, a person who preaches this universal idea, you may find him to be very dogmatic, narrow in his own life, in his own home. He may talk of gender inequality, but he may not be treating his wife the same way as he preaches. So there is inequality. We have to accept that fact. And Sri Ramakrishna accepted that. He said, why should you destroy diversity? But if you really want a universal existence, you want peace based on universalism, then you have to go deeper. You have to experience the spiritual oneness of existence, has to be experienced, not just spoken of. That is what he did. He did not go. He did not, in fact, leave Dakshineshwar. Now and then he just went for some places of pilgrimage. But unlike Swami Vivekananda, he did not go out anywhere. He just lived the life. As Swamiji said, he just lived the life and he left the explaining to me. Swamiji, what he did was he just explained what his master did. So all these external factors of like preaching, like all these academic approaches will not help us. That is a core message of universal message of Sri Ramakrishna. We have to remember that, as Sri Ramakrishna said, you have to see the divinity dwelling in human forms through your own experience. And the other things are means. Seva is just a means. But that Shiva Jnane Jiv Seva, that knowledge that divinity is dwelling in all human forms, that the basic spiritual vision, as our rishis explained, that man's real self is ever pure, Satchidananda, the immortal, the divine, the same supreme being, whatever name you may call him, by any name, whether you call him as the Father in heaven, or you call him the Divine Mother, or the spiritual core, the man's vision that his self, whether it is the individual self or the supreme self, basically it is pure, free, immortal and divine. And the same consciousness resides in every one of us, even the inanimate world, the inanimate Prakriti. Prakriti owes its existence to Purusha, or the pure consciousness. That is an idea which Sri Ramakrishna preached. And that is why he said the goal of human life in that sense is the realization of the ultimate reality or unity or consciousness, which alone, there is no second thought about it. That is what our rishis found, that is what all the spiritual masters like Christ, Buddha and all our rishis unanimously said, that spirit is primary. You can't have God and Mammon at the same time. That really what it means is not that Mammon is not necessary, but the thing is, at the basis of everything, the essence of all religions is that the ultimate reality, which is pure consciousness, whether you call it by any name, that God by any name, is to be experienced, not just thought about, not just discussed about, but has to be not only intellectually understood, but have to be realized in our day-to-day life. So another important contribution which points to universality, which makes Sri Ramakrishna's message universal. He practiced all these different religions. So it can be realized through various paths, Sarva Dharma Sabhanvaya. In that sense, he said all religions are true. By religions, he did not mean, he just said these are different paths. But the path is not the goal. You have to remember that. If you think the path is everything, that is why Swamiji famously said, it is good to be born in a church, in a religious institution, but it is very bad to die in a church. That means we have to overcome the limitations which enable you to start your journey, and you should not mistake the path for the goal. The goal is always more important. The goal is the pure spirit, the all-inclusive divinity, the all-pervading divinity, the pure consciousness about which our Vedas speak. And Sri Ramakrishna's experiences, based on his own sadhana and his own life, they even transcend the experiences of many of the rishis. That is his uniqueness. So Swami Vivekananda was forced to say what the Vedas and the Upanishads and all the different scriptures, 3,000 years of Indian spiritual history lived in one life. And that was necessary in this personality of Sri Ramakrishna, so that everybody is included. Every sect, every religion, every human being, even animals, everybody was included. That makes it very universal, his message very universal. Another important fact which we normally don't focus upon is when we try to experience this reality, there are certain preconditions which have been insisted upon by almost all the religions. You see the commandments of Judaism, Jewish religion, you see the commandments, read the Bible and all the Sermon on the Mount and everything. If you read all the major religions, even Buddhism, they insist on one thing, which Sri Ramakrishna in his rustic language said, renunciation of Kamini Kanchan. Now this word irritates many people, especially when the gospel was being translated. The American readers found that how can we translate this? Of course, the literal translation is woman and gold, but that will give a wrong idea that Sri Ramakrishna was referring to. But he was referring to lust and greed. Properly translated, it just means lust and greed. What is lust and greed? What is impurity? So, like all prophets before him, he gave tremendous importance to purity of mind. Renunciation means purity of mind. What does purity of mind mean? Purity of mind simply means this: become less gross, become more subtle. We all know that a human personality, according to Vedanta, begins with the Annamaya Kosha, then we have the Pranamaya Kosha, the living force behind the body, then we have the Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and different koshas. For convenience, human personality has been graded according to its grossness. So purity means simply this. It's not some do's and don'ts. Don't do this. If you do this, you will become impure, you will go to hell. As there are no do's and don'ts. Purity simply means that renunciation of lust and greed. Now that is the root cause of all our problems. And Sri Ramakrishna never hesitated to tell this. If you insist on becoming gross or holding on to your gross personality, then you cannot become the spirit. The Bible says it. The Jesus Christ very clearly says you can't have God and mammon at the same time. You can't have both. You can't be gross and subtle at the same time. If you want to be subtle, you have to rise above the gross. So purity means rising above the gross values. The values that make you greedy, the values that make you lustful, that values which bind you to this gross existence. So Prakriti no doubt binds, or nature binds you to the gross, but also shows you the way. According to Raj Yoga, Swamiji's Raj Yoga, like a mother, she also releases you from bondage. Prakriti releases you from bondage. At the same time, the negative side of Prakriti also binds you and makes you gross. And then all the problems start. All these quarrels, all these distinctions, all these things are because we do not resort to a life which makes us more and more pure. It is very important. According to Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi was the spiritual consort of Sri Ramakrishna. Somebody asked, what is the main message? When we are speaking of universal messages, one of the messages of Sri Ramakrishna is harmony of religions, accepting every path to be true. Not just toleration, but acceptance that any path, if sincerely led, any path to the Supreme, to God, will lead to the same goal if you are sincere. That was one of his messages. So somebody asked Sri Ma Sharda Devi, or Holy Mother as she is known, was that the main message of Sri Ramakrishna? Did he come to unite all the religions? He said, yes, that is one of the messages, but that is not the main message. Because this unity, just saying that all religions lead to the same goal and then quarreling with each other, that will not happen if purity of mind, of renunciation is not there. So that is why our scriptures insist on Abhyasa and Vairagya. Abhyasa means spiritual practice. The practice that raises you from brute to man and from man to God. makes you give up the gross for the subtle, for the more subtle, and then you finally become one with pure consciousness. That sadhana, that abhyasa, is possible only if there is vairagya. You can't hold on to the gross and say that I want to become subtle. You can't say I want to lead a life of spirit and with one part of the mind holding on to the gross values. So that is in that context, this universal message of renunciation of lust and greed. In Bengali he said, Kamini Kanchan Tyag. People wonder why he is repeating it again and again. That was the most universal of his message. It's not just true for Indians, it's true for everybody, everywhere. And that is the root cause. As Swamiji said, the whole of Europe, the materialistic Europe, which did not listen or which did not pay attention to the spiritual message of Jesus Christ, as he said. Because Christ himself said, man cannot live by bread alone. And we were running after bread. We were running after the gross. He has to live by holding on to the spirit. And Swamiji warned, even before the two world wars were fought in the name of with science, technology and all the progress that rationality and scientific spirit gave to this European races. He said, Swamiji said, Europe is sitting on the top of a volcano. And if it does not mend its ways, that is why even Arnold Toynbee said, Sri Krishna's wonderful way of serving God in man or trying to see the divinity within, the realization of the consciousness within, the divinity within. If it is not practiced, then you cannot expect peace in the world. You can expect peace only if we touch the spiritual core, not only one as individually, but collectively, as a nation, as different countries of the world. The more there are people who hold on to the spirit. So that is exactly what purity means. When we speak of purity, it really means that. So that is the core message. Now, as I said, I'll have to stop because let us have some more questions so that this session becomes more interesting. But the core message of Sri Ramakrishna is that God realization, or any other name you can give it, whether you say self-realization, God realization, or trying to be one with the Father in heaven. There are so many ways through which these concepts have been explained in different religions. But the focus, Sri Ramakrishna said, is purity of mind, and that purity of mind with an all-inclusive attitude, trying to see the unity with all the diversity that is there. With all the diversity that is there, if you try to find the underlying unity, then you will not only attain to a kind of universalism, which is more sustaining. And if we hold on to the temporal values, more and more people, if they hold on to the eternal values and consider this temporal and remain unattached to them, like that is what Vairagya is all about. The word Vairagya sometimes puts fear in people's mind. Vairagya is nothing but giving up the temporal, but for giving up the temporal, for attaining a universal, for the spiritual. So there is nothing to give up. We are just trying to hold on to the consciousness, the pure spirit, at the cost of the gross universe, which leads to diversity. Then alone there will be universalism. Then alone there will be true peace within our hearts and everywhere around us in society. So I thank you. I thank Swami Udayananji for giving me this opportunity to share a few words. But I would like, if there are some questions, somebody can ask. So somebody can help me to, if there are in the chat box.
We will thank you very much, Maharaji, for your such an enlightened and very
insightful talk. So we will invite the questions. Before we invite the question, today is very important day for two counts. We have achieved 30th session, and with you at the helm, we are so lucky to have you. And today also happens to be the Tithi Puja of Premananda Ji, one of the 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So we will be celebrating at 9:00 p.m. Philippine time, 6:30 p.m. India time. If some of you can join, you are most welcome. That is 9:00 p.m. So any question is welcome. Please identify yourself and let us be a little brief. I don't find, I think, in the chat box question, but there will be, I'll also search it once again. But Anantji, do you have a question in mind?
Pranam Maharaj, this is Anand Chiplunker from Pune.
Namaste.
Since Nirmal has put me on the spot directly by asking me to ask question, let me just ask a sort of a doubt which comes to my mind after hearing this. What would be a typical mistake which a devotee of different religion may be making in trying to, I would say, in trying to understand this unity in diversity?
Typical mistake is this diversity is going to remain. There is no harm if diversity is there. See, that is one thing we have to understand. Our rishis, they never decried or they did not criticize Prakriti. Prakriti is bound to follow its own, her own rules. So she is unattached. So there will be diversity. There is no harm in living amidst diversity. Sri Ramakrishna himself was so diverse. He loved to sing, he loved to dance, he loved to do kirtan. Even Brahmos who did not believe in idol worship, they were welcome. Even atheists were welcome. So diversity he never tried to harm. In fact, he did not even criticize a single custom. Swami Vivekananda said, I learned some great lessons from my master. Even Swami Vivekananda says, even I criticize certain practices. But Thakur or Sri Ramakrishna, in a very practical way, in a universal way, said, who knows, there may be a back door also. Every house has so many doors. You may not go through the front door, but don't criticize anybody. There may be a back door also. So he was never against diversity. Under any circumstances, he took man where he stood, or every human being, and tried to lift him in a very, very positive way. So that is the most practical thing. Diversity, we don't have to hate. We have to accept. We have to accept diversity as it is. We can't hope to change the world. That is what fanatics do. They want everybody to follow their ideology. But every human being is unique. That is the first step we have to do. Accept the diversity. And that diversity will not hamper the efforts in unity. But that unity will come not at the gross level. That is the mistake we make. Every ism, for example, communists think that everybody should become a communist, then the society will be peaceful. But that doesn't work that way. Somebody says only capitalism will work, will bring peace. So there are different isms, there are political systems, social systems. That doesn't work that way. So diversity has to be allowed. There will be diverse people. There will be good people, there will be bad people. Depending on the gunas, there will be different levels of people. But those who want unity, the best solution they should do is try to touch that which is unifying. And what is unifying is the underlying spirit. The more gross we become, the more diversity you can see. But the more subtle we go at the Manomaya Kosha level, the Vijnanamaya Kosha level. There are different layers of our personality. So we have to become more and more subtle, and that happens only through spiritual practice. That is what Sri Ramakrishna said, that you have to become, not that you have to all of a sudden give up the gross, which is not possible. So you have to slowly get detached from the gross so that you can attach to the subtle and higher levels of existence. And when you do that, when you slowly do abhyasa or practice of identifying with the spirit and at the same time giving up the gross, both can't happen. It's like having the gross at the same time having the subtle. So that's why Jesus said, you can't have God and Mammon at the same time. It's very difficult to understand what he said. Otherwise, he would have saved his life. He would not have been crucified. Because he did not care for the gross. But can we do it? We cannot do what these prophets did. But what the least we can do is to reduce our greed and dependence on the things which are temporal and hold on to the eternal as much as we can through spiritual practices, to practicing discrimination, as Sri Ramakrishna said, between the real, that which is permanent, and that which is temporary. So giving up the temporary means giving up diversity and attaching, not giving up, individually giving up diversity. Diversity will remain. There will be enough people who will be gross, who will hold on to this material, otherwise the play will not go on. That is what Leela is all about. So without criticizing anybody, if we focus on our own spiritual progress, then we will inspire a few people. That's what Swami Vivekananda said, told Sister Nivedita, manifest the divinity within and everything else will be harmoniously arranged around it. We try to solve our problems. We try to solve our diversities and quarrels and all by some kind of compromise or patchwork. But the best way is to manifest the divinity within. Once you do it, you will see all the people around you, they will automatically change. At least subjectively, they will not harm you. So that is the only way, or the only way which Sri Ramakrishna preached or lived. And that manifestation of the divinity is what we should aim at. Okay? So that's how we
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj Ji. P. Parthasarathi from Purulia, West Bengal, India is asking how to hold our mind free, especially during meditation, to focus our spiritual practices.
How to hold the mind free?
How to hold our mind free, especially during meditation, to focus our spiritual practices.
You see, the mind will never be free. The very tendency of the mind is to attach itself to something. If you attach itself, if you make the mind attach itself to something, to the spirit, then it will automatically give up attaching itself to the lower things. That is what I was saying, Abhyasa and Vairagya. The same method has been preached in the Gita, has been preached in the Gospel, and preached by everybody. Jesus, by all Buddha, that mind will never be free. It has two choices. The Manomaya Kosha, as you see, or the Manomaya Kosha especially, is what we call the mind. It is also matter. It is a subtle matter, slightly subtler than the prana, the living forces. So mind is also like some material, subtle material. It will attach itself. If you allow it to attach itself to the physical body and the prana or the lower things, then it will take that color. The mind will take the color. Suppose there is a crystal. If there is a pink flower, the crystal will appear pink. So the mind will attach. You cannot free the mind at all. The mind has to be detached from one thing and attached to something else. If you attach the mind to the spirit within, as you develop your buddhi, that is what they say. When the mind is attached, the reactive mind, now we are living on a, using our reactive mind, which is known as manas in Vedanta. That reactive mind is always reacting. It sees something, it reacts. It sees something, it reacts. That reactive mind has to be slowly converted into buddhi, which is a steady mind. A steady mind, according to Gita, helps you. That is possible only through meditation or through bhakti or through karma yoga. If it is properly practiced, especially meditation, if it is properly practiced, and if you focus on internal reality, and you just don't meditate on the gross. If you meditate on money, you meditate on other things outside you, then how can the mind be free? It will never be free. Even otherwise, when you focus on the subtle within, then also the mind will not be free, but the mind will be transmuted into the spirit. That's what it says. Shuddha, Thakur used to say in Bengali, Shuddha Mon, Shuddha Buddhi, Shuddha Atma Ek. What did he mean? That same mind, which you can't make it free, it can assume the form of Shuddha Atma once it attains to the level of Buddhi, the pure discriminative intellect, which knows what is good, what is bad. Then it will be ready to identify itself with the Atma. So the mind will not be free in that sense, but it can be attached to the highest so that it can be released from the lower things. That's all.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. I've got a question here.
Yes.
Parvati in France. Can I ask?
Yeah, please carry on.
Thank you very much, Swami. So good to hear you again. I have a question about Ramakrishna. Can we say that you were talking about truth, and can we say that Ramakrishna make end of Kali Yuga and the beginning of Satya Yuga?
Yes, that is what Sri Ramakrishna said. That depends on how you understand what Kali Yuga is and what Satya Yuga is. See, according to the Puranas, there are 4 yugas, as you know. It starts the first yuga, which is Satya Yuga, where everybody followed the divine path, the spiritual path, very spontaneously. That was the ideal yuga according to our scriptures. Then we had a slight deterioration, and then the yugas keep on changing, and finally we came to Kali Yuga. That is an idea. You can't say that Kali Yuga began at this particular point. There were always people who apparently belonged to the Kali Yuga even in the Satya Yuga. Not that 100% of the people were good, but a great majority. That is what is believed. So when Sri Ramakrishna came, in what sense did he say? According to the scriptures, we are still in Kali Yuga. So how is it possible that a new Yuga will come? In what sense did Swami Vivekananda say that by Sri Ramakrishna's advent, the Satya Yuga has come? What he actually meant was that this Satya Yuga, where a large number of people, and increasingly, he said it's a beginning of Satya Yuga. He didn't say Satya Yuga has come. It has begun. But it takes time for people to understand this universal message and appreciate it. And it is a very, very gradual process. It's not that Satya Yuga suddenly became Kali Yuga. It had to pass through Dwapar Yuga and other Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga and all those Yugas. They are just approximate classifications which show that in Satya Yuga there will be a majority of the people or a large number of people who have spiritual ideals. Whereas in the Kali Yuga, unfortunately, more and more people are gross and worldly. That is why Sri Ramakrishna said, in this Kali Yuga, it is enough if you hold on to truth. Truth itself is a tapasya in Kali Yuga. So holding on to truth was very natural in Satya Yuga. That's why it is known as Satya Yuga. But now people think that without falsehood, you cannot survive in this world. So Satya Yuga cannot come all of a sudden. It has started. So holding on to Satya or truth as the only method through which you can transcend this ill effect of the Kali Yuga. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna said, speaking the truth or holding on to truth, not just speaking. Truth in action, truth, sincerity in action, word and deed. So in thought, everything is necessary, but that itself is a tapasya. In Satya Yuga, you have to do lot of tapasya, lot of austerities to realize the goal. But in Kali Yuga, according to Sri Ramakrishna, it is easy. So in that sense, the beginning of Sri Ramakrishna's life, where he gave a life-saving message, a universal message based on unity in diversity, which if practiced will take us back to that Satya Yuga. Whether it was real or hypothetical, I do not know, because these are all concepts which our Puranas have given us. But what it means, according to Swami Vivekananda, that by after Sri Ramakrishna's birth, the Satya Yuga has begun. He said it in a very positive way, because more and more people, if they listen to, if they have the patience to understand the life and message, it's not just enough to understand Sri Ramakrishna's life or his message. One has to live it. If that happens, then Satya Yuga is bound to come. Okay? Namaste.
Thank you, Maharajji. We have two more questions, if you can kindly accommodate. Sania.
And Nirmal, Maharaj, I have a question, Maharaj. Nirmal,
Yes,
is
yes.
there any time left?
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, please,
No,
please go on.
Okay. Maharaj, I just have a question. I was wondering whether I should ask this question or not. But in most of the lectures, many lectures, not all lectures, we keep hearing that God realization is should be the fundamental goal in our life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, why that it should be like that? What is the problem if the God realization is not the fundamental or the primary goal in our life? Because if I am not thinking in that line, I will die and I will reborn in some other place. I will not remember who was I. My last life, I was someone, Mr. Hiranna Mukhopadhyay. I was born in India. So what is the problem? Try to be a good person.
Yeah.
But and second, a related question, Maharaj, that I personally feel that whatever books you read, whatever lectures you listen, that feeling that God realization should be the primary goal, your love for God, it will come with the grace of God. But external forces can, it's my personal feeling, external forces, can it really change the mindset of a person?
Definitely. There are two questions which you have asked. First is, why should God realization be the goal of life?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah.
Now the thing is, Sri Ramakrishna said, he expressed his opinion because he always spoke the truth. What he knew to be the truth, he spoke. Whether people follow it or not, it's not possible also. He knew that. He knew very clearly that God realization will not be the goal of life for, say, even 99% of the people, or even more, 99.99 you can say. That is why they say in Gita also, Sri Ramakrishna also said that, but Gita it is very clearly said, out of thousands, somebody will take to spiritual path. Even out of that, only a few will hold on to God. So that is not a problem at all, because anyway, whether God realization is the goal of life or it is not, people are going to live the way Prakriti makes them live. So Prakriti will, if you are fully gross, that is, there are more tamas, so it will take time, no doubt, as you said, that after several births. But the idea that you are not remembering it doesn't mean there is no continuity of existence. You may not remember, but your samskaras, the baggage that you take, the baggage that we have packed for ourselves, we have packed ourselves and then we go to another destination. Does the bag change? The bag doesn't change. We go with the same bag, and whatever we have done in the past life, we have to give an account of that. We may not remember, but the suffering that we undergo. Now, if there is suffering, we sometimes blame God. We say, that person is doing so many bad things and still he is happy and I am doing such a wonderful... But we don't see, though we may not see our previous life, there are people who can know what they have done. They are great spiritual people who can go into their past and find out how many evil actions they have done, how many good actions they have done. And of course, people like Sri Ramakrishna could see somebody and find out and tell them what will happen in the future. That is very rare. I know that. But even the fact that you will not remember, it is not true, because you may not remember, but you will start feeling its effect. Now, when there is heat in the room, you don't know who has put the heat, and you don't have to know also, but you still feel the heat. Your hand will burn, isn't it? So the thing is, if we don't believe, or if a majority of the people don't consider that God realization is the only goal of life, it doesn't make any difference to God as such, because those people will give their message and go. It is for us. That is why once one lady in the West once told, I don't agree, Swami, with anything that you say. You say that this, you say that, but I don't agree with you. Then Swami Vivekananda very quietly, because he never used to get angry, he told her very clearly, what I am and what I preach is written on my brow. We say in Bengali that kapale likha che. So what I am and what I preach is on my brow, my forehead. If you can read it, the gain is yours. If you can't read it, the loss is yours. I have nothing to do with it. So they never insisted. These people never said. They said what they had to say. And as Thakur said, in a fish, leja mundo baad diye niye now. If you don't want, you remove the head, you remove the tail. You take only the central portion of the fish. What he meant was that all people will not take the fish in its entirety. Some people will take some portion, some people will like some other portions. So from his message, he has given not only, he emphasized on that the ultimate goal, but there can be lower goals, and people are following these lower goals. So there is no harm, and it will not be stopped. It will not come to a stop. Only a few people, only a rare few, a creative minority, as Swamiji said. In the whole universe, there is only a creative minority which will believe in this, and they will make themselves, their lives fulfilled. And if people are lucky to read that, to understand that, they will get the peace and all those things. But there is no harm. I mean, no harm in the sense, even if we want to, people, even if we tell everybody, and even if they are intellectually convinced, I don't think the samskaras or the kleshas, as Patanjali says, will allow them. They may think, they may read any amount of books, and they may get convinced also, but somehow the way of Prakriti is such that they will forget, unless they get blows. That is what Swami Vivekananda says. He says, we grab everything from nature, but nature has its own mechanism. He says, you grab everything and try to pile everything around yourself. Say, for example, you say, I don't believe, I just believe in gathering wealth around myself. But he says, a time will come, even that person need not be hopeless. Nature herself will grab that person by the throat and say, now you release, give up all the things which you have gathered, and then religion will begin to him. If you see Arjuna's life, it was Vishada. The first chapter is Vishada. Unless you get blows, Arjuna was very happy, conquering everybody. But then why did he come to spirituality? Why did he even ask Sri Krishna what is the goal of life? Sri Krishna explained the goal of life to him, but when he was absolutely powerless even to lift the bow, something strange happened. That Vishada came, that depression came. So Swamiji says that for all religions, irrespective of their founder, they say that this kind of discontentment with the present state of things, of course you can call it grace, it may be because of previous samskaras, but a stage will come when you know that other than God there is nothing permanent, everything is temporary. And when you see things which you love so dearly slipping between your fingers, you earn millions and one fine day you find everything gone. It is then that we understand or we appreciate. We might have read books. We might have read books and even understood, but that doesn't make us hold on to this idea of God realization is the only goal of life till the blows come. So that's why Swamiji very clearly said it is in his own life. He is not talking of anybody else. He says, in my own life, pain has taught me more lessons than pleasure. Pleasure has always confused me. In Kathopanishad, the young boy, 14-year-old boy, who, unlike his father, knew God realization, knew what it is the goal of life, but he did not know what that God realization is. So he goes to Yama. He says, I want to know the secret of death. Then he says, Shreya and prayer. The pleasurable and the good come to every person. Every moment of our life, we have to make a choice. Either take Shreya or take prayer. If you take Shreya, then you go towards God realization. If you take prayer, which most people do because that is the pleasurable, then you will be doomed. You will go deeper and deeper. So this young 14-year-old boy understood, and Yama told him how not to get attracted by Shreya and hold on to the eternal. So that is the only practical, not only, that is a very practical utility, that do we want the permanent or do we want the temporary? Because a day will come when we will be tired of these toys. The child has to grow someday. It may like some toys, but if you ask a grown-up man, you play with these toys, he'll say, no, that was a thing of the past. I am not now bored about all those things. So, God realization is the goal of life, comes after a certain stage, after we spiritually grow. When we really feel that these toys, these chocolates no longer interest us. But as children, we were very happy. A chocolate was everything for us. So also in the world, this is the case. And what was your second question?
Please unmute yourself, Hiranya.
Yes.
One of the second question is, does it come, this God, this belief by reading books or listening to lectures, or purely by God's grace?
Yeah, both. It is both. See, books are just give you a hint. As I told you, books will never, the intellectual understanding will not help us. That's why with Abhyasa Vairagya is also, you have to detach. If you don't remove a stone, if there are two stones, if you don't remove the upper stone, then you can't remove the lower stone. It will simply fall. So what one has to do is, we have to depend on grace, but just sitting and waiting for grace will not help. We have to put in some efforts. So when you try to go one step, as Thakur used to say, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you go one step towards God, then God will come 10 steps. But when that grace will come, when you have taken that one step. So intellectually understanding, reading books, satsang and all those things, they may be the first step, but they are not the last. Ultimately, you have to not only cook the food, but you have to eat it. You have to cook it. You just read like the recipe book, it will not help. Reading the recipe book is important if you want to prepare a good meal. But after having done that, you have to follow what the books say. So experience or an effort to get these experiences may not be all experiences which Thakur got or other great people got. But if somebody has got, then I can also do it. See, in the worldly sphere, how do Olympians win gold medal? They said somebody got the gold medal, somebody ran the race in 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds, then I can also do it. So that motivation, by reading they may get the motivation, but they have to run themselves. So grace comes only when you put in self-effort. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharajji. There is, I think we have one more question by Mr. T.R. Mohan from Manila, Philippines. Mr. Mohan, can you please mention your question? Because in the chat box it is not so clear. I think you will be able to elucidate it better. Mr. Mohan, T.R. Mohan.
Pranam Maharajji, yes. I thought I heard you say that it is not good to die in the church. Did I hear right?
Yes. I mean, it needs to be understood. Yes, yes. No. It is good to be born in a church. What it means is, it's not to be taken literally. What Swami Vivekananda meant, you can say temple also or mosque also. What he meant is organized religion, as the previous question was, the intellectual understanding of dogmas or even philosophies, all these things is compared to a church or a temple or an organization. When Swamiji said, because he was speaking to Christians, he said church. If he was speaking to Buddhists, he would have said Sangha. He would have said Sangha. And if he was speaking to Hindus, he would have said temple. So it's not a question of what he meant to be by the sentence that it is good to be born in a church, means it is good to start with an intellectual understanding of the principles of a particular religion or spiritual faith or some faith, and understanding those principles. But it is not good to just live with that knowledge. One has to experience. So that means you have to overcome. That is why the Vedas, Swami Vivekananda praised the Vedas, because that is the only scripture in the world, according to him, which says that you have to overgrow, you have to go beyond the Vedas. Tatra Veda Aveda Bhavati. That means when you realize, when you experience, then you don't need the Vedas. So it is not good to die in a church, means when you grow and when you experience these things, you don't need the church to support you or any institution, organization, or even ideas. It may not be a physical church. What church, by the word church, what he meant was these ideas, these scriptures. You don't have to still read the Gita. Because Sri Ramakrishna used to say, after reading the whole Gita, he said, I got the essence of Gita, then why do I need to read it? It is Tyagi, to renounce the gross for the subtle. So once you have understood that, then you don't have to hold on to that book or the church or the temple or the organization. Not only physically, but mentally you have to detach yourself. You may still live in the church, because where will you live? Where will you go? You have to live in this world. You can't say, even the Jivan Muktas, the people who became free, they lived in this world. Sri Ramakrishna also lived in this world. So, but what they meant was, you should not die as holding on to these ideas and not getting any experience. So that's the idea. You got the point?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj-ji, last question will take your indulgence. We have a student called Sanaya, so we don't want to, we want to encourage her. So what she is asking is that when in, two questions, when in our spiritual life do we understand this unity in diversity? Question number 2, what do we need to practice as a student?
So at what stage of life, as long as you live, so long do you learn. Sri Ramakrishna has given this wonderful advice. So there is no question that after class 5 or class 6 or class 7, you will understand everything. No. Even Sri Ramakrishna says, the more I live, the more I learn. So these lessons will go on till you find total unity. Diversity will always be there, unity will always be there. Unity in diversity will be understood in degrees. First, you will try to find unity in human beings, then you will see unity everywhere, then in inanimate objects. So the realization also changes. So diversity, seeing unity in diversity will never end. It is an ever-growing process till you reach the culmination where there is total underlying, you become one with that unity, and you accept diversity is just a manifestation of that unity. That's the idea. But as students, the best thing to do would be to understand and stop our reactions, the manas, which gets disturbed by diversity. If you have strong likes and dislikes, Patanjali says raga and dvesha and abhinivesha. 3. Avidya and asmita is there, ego is there. And that gives rise to strong likes and dislikes. The moment you say, I like this and I don't like this, that means you are going away from that unity. Unity means you accept everything. You don't have any strong likes or dislikes. The Sthita Prajna, which Gita says, you may get heat, you may get cold. You have to be you have to accept everything as far as possible. It is not practical in the beginning. As students, you have to slowly get rid of your raga and dvesha, like your likes and dislikes, strong likes and dislikes. That is the least we can do. Okay? For a student, that much is enough.
Thank you very much, Maharaj Ji. Now, our friend, yes, Sanaya is thanking you. Now, I would request our friend Hiranya Mukhopadhyay to kindly give vote of thanks. Hiranya.
Yes, Maharaj, pranam. Maharaj, pranam. On behalf of all the devotees here in Philippines, Manila and elsewhere, we would like to convey our heartfelt thanks and pranam to you for this wonderful lecture, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you very much for your support, Maharaj Ji, and we look forward to your further support in future also. Such an excellent and enlightening discourse. We would look forward for your further support and such lectures. We will write to you, Maharaj Ji. And before we end, for informal session of 5 to 7 months, minutes, which you have been so generous to allow, I would request our friends who are not connected with us to please write their email in the chat box, and we will note down and we'll give you all the invitations. Sanaya, please, can you please unmute yourself? With these words, we close today's discussion. Please give me 30 seconds time to close recording, and then let us come back for 5 to 10 minutes of informal chat where people can say their pranam, namaste, and also if they have some question which they could not ask in the formal session. Thank you once again, Maharaj Ji, and thanks everybody for kindly being here to spend their Sunday. And we are so grateful to each one of you. And of course, Maharaj Ji, we are so happy that this is the 30th session and we are having the 30th session with your presence and with the Mind House of Guidance that you gave us. And also, you have given us the universal message of Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji. So I now request for your silence for 30 seconds so that I can end the recording.